The Hot Mess Express. Oh my gosh, we're
Oh,
doing another episode. Are you ready?
yes, I'm ready. I'm really
Okay.
excited about this episode too.
Me too. You have no idea.
Hey, everybody. It's Everything Energy with Tina and Jeremy. I'm Jeremy Bills.
I'm Tina Falk.
How's it going, Tina?
It's good. Allergies. Uh,
Hot Mess Express.
yeah, Hot Mess Express. It's in the throat, it's in the nose, the burning, and it's in the head.
Yeah.
Ah,
The
but,
cottonwoods are blooming and in full force in
mhm,
Utah, people.
that's
It's intense.
that's for sure. Yeah, the other day when we had all that wind, my son left his bedroom window open, and he got into bed, and his whole bed was covered in dust. He
Oh,
had
I'm
to get up
sure.
and wash everything. So, yeah,
We
the wind
biggest
doesn't help.
windstorm, the biggest windstorm I've ever seen in my life. I looked out my window. The wind was blowing
It's like
horizontal and and you couldn't see. It was like we were in, like, the middle of, sand dunes or whatever,
yeah.
and it just ripped up all of our flowers. Our
Mhm.
beautiful purple flowers in the front yard are all ripped up. We thought it
Um,
was some of the local kids coming and picking our flowers. Nope, it was the wind.
the wind. Oh my gosh, yeah, what a mess. So how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just been, working on business stuff and getting used to allergies. I go walking every morning. We live by Utah Lake, so I get up and I walk every morning by the lake, and it's so beautiful this year. It's very full. The snow melted very quickly this year, so
Mhm.
the lake is full.
Yeah, you can see where the waves have pushed some of the debris up even on the path.
Yeah,
It's kind
yeah,
of fun. But we've
it
got an
is.
exciting episode today. Well, exciting for me, and I think probably not a lot of people know about this. I had heard about it years ago, but really thought, oh, that just seems like too much. And then to find out that you offer this as a service and now
I do.
you're doing a reading for me and my husband today
Yeah,
for
yeah.
everybody to get to see and hear and experience this. It's an aspect of Chinese astrology, or not Chinese, of Western astrology. So
Yes,
it's kind of an adjunct or a supplement to that.
yes,
So tell us what it
exactly.
is.
So we're going to be talking about astrocartography today. And you know me, I like to get a definition, so I always Google it right before we jump on here. But just the Google definition, it says astrocartography is a form of astrology that focuses on geography. It uses your birth natal chart to create a map of the best geological locations for you and the energies connected to it. Astrocartography can help you find places that holistically benefit you, places to live, and also travel.
Mm.
So, what we're going to do today, I thought you would be such a good case study because how many places have you lived, Tina?
A few.
Quite a few. So, what
Oh,
we're going to do today is we're going to go through kind of the roadmap of your life, all of the different places that you've lived. And in astrocartography, there's three main charts that I like to look at. The first one is called the astrocartography map. That is what we kind of went over in the definition. It takes the aspects of your natal chart and lays it down over the planet Earth to
mm,
find where those planetary influences are going to be heightened and illuminated
mm,
geographically. The second chart that we look at is the transit chart, where the planets are at the time that you're moving to show and
mm,
support why you're doing that move, when you're doing that move, what is that move going to instigate in your life.
mm.
And then the final chart we look at is the relocation chart. Now, you've moved a lot of places, so we're not going to do the relocation chart for every place that you've lived. We're just going to look at the lines and some of the transits for some of the major moves. But ultimately, the relocation chart is your natal chart, but it's as if you were born in the place that you are going to be moving. So, for
Oh,
example, your relocation chart would be the same date and time you were born, but if you were born in Salt Lake City.
gotcha.
So,
Oh my gosh, this is fascinating.
kind of cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know there's people out there that have lived in a lot more places than I've lived. I mean, it's a few.
Right. Right. But, when you're talking to someone like me who's lived in 2 places, like, in the world, I've lived in Utah and Australia, and I moved around a lot when I was in Australia because I was a Mormon missionary, if you can imagine that. But, I mean, so I moved to Australia and then back to Salt Lake City, and then now I live in Utah County, which is kind of funny because the move from Salt Lake County to Utah County was very intense for me. So it's
Mhm.
kind of funny to watch your experience because you're like, yeah, we're moving. And you kind of, when you said, yeah, we're moving, I was like, oh my God, that's so huge. And you're like, no, not if you knew how many places I've moved to.
Yeah, if I'm not moving houses, I'm moving furniture or something.
Right?
I'm moving the chess pieces around somehow.
Exactly.
So I have
Exactly.
this
So
quick
wait,
question for you before
yeah,
we begin. Do you
yes.
remember your little spiel when somebody would open the door after your Miss Elder Bills would ring the
Oh my
doorbell?
God, yeah,
You
yeah, so we
do?
would knock on the door. Oh, yeah. That shit is emblazoned in my mind for the rest of my fucking life. Are you kidding me? Okay, here's an Aries rant. Here's what I used to say at the door. I'd knock on the door and be
Ding
like,
dong.
"Hi. Hi, I'm Elder Bills from the Church of Jesus Christ of Lat—" That's usually when we would get the slam. Now, mind you, we were in Sydney, Australia. In
In what
Utah.
year? What year was that?
Oh, we're talking 1990, the mid-1990s, 95,
Okay.
90. No, I went in 96, 97, 98.
Okay.
So it's gonna be kind of funny to kind of revisit what you were doing in 95 and 98 while I was knocking on doors being a Mormon missionary. But yeah, we would go to the doors in Australia. In Utah, there's a Mormon church on every corner. In Australia, there's a pub on every corner. Australians hate Mormon missionaries because the first thing we tell them to do is get baptized and quit drinking alcohol.
Mhm.
So we would knock on the door. Hi, I'm Elder Bills from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have a message about Jesus Christ for you today. I mean, now that I think back on it, I'm like thoroughly offended by what I was saying to
Mm.
people
Mhm.
and shocked and amazed that some people let us in.
It is really bizarre. It's really bizarre when they come to your door here in Utah, because it's
Well,
like,
yeah, we
I know
talked
where to
about that
find
last
you.
episode.
Yeah, right?
With the I love Jesus boy coming to my door. I mean, God love him,
Mhm.
but I mean, I can't, oh, man. Yeah, it's a huge trigger. It's a huge freaking trigger because it's like, "Oh my god, I really did say that." And then you would get into their house, and then you would teach them, like, the whole missionary structure has completely changed now.
Mm,
But, you used to have we memorized, they were called discussions, and they were little pamphlets that had,
mm,
like, 20 pages, and we memorized them verbatim. That's why people go to Provo, to the missionary training center for 2 months before they go overseas or wherever they're going to go, because they study these little pamphlets for months, and you just regurgitate the information
mhm,
like like a robot. And so,
mhm,
yeah, we would get into these discussions with people, and by the 4th discussion, we had committed them to get baptized, committed them to pay tithing, committed them to all of these, terrible things.
jeez.
I know. I know. So, man, if you ask a question about my mission, I can go for hours.
Well, we'll have an episode on that for sure.
Let's do that,
It
yeah.
is fascinating and interesting.
Yes.
Okay, where do you
Okay,
wanna begin?
astrocartography. Okay, let's start with your natal chart. We're
Okay.
going to look at your natal chart just to kind of see. Now, Tina mentioned in previous episodes that she was a Pisces rising. There's many different house systems that you can use in Western astrology, and the house system that I use is called Placidus. And in the Placidus system, we have Tina as an Aquarius rising. So Aquarius is the sign of freedom. It's the sign that marches to the beat of its own drum. The worst thing that you can tell an Aquarius is what to do, how to do it, when to do it. Aquarians like to do things their own way. Her sun shines in the sign of Aries, which is the sign of the warrior. It's the one that's the pioneer, the one that wants to move forward and do its own thing. But it also wants to fight for the right thing. It wants to fight for the people that they love. And then we also have her moon in the sign of Sagittarius, which is much like Aries is a fire sign. Sagittarius is the philosopher. It's also the person that wants to teach, and this is why Tina runs the Via School of Feng Shui. Um, that's her biggest passion, and her moon shines in the 10th house of fate, destiny, and business. So she's in the right occupation, I would say. So I just wanted to touch on those basic things. Now, at the end of our journey of looking at her astrocartography, we're going to look at her relocation chart. And there's one major planet that shifts complete houses. So I want you to pay attention to the fourth house, where that little orange number 4 looking thing is. That glyph is Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of good fortune and abundance. In Tina's natal chart, having Jupiter in the fourth house tells us a story of her philosophy of abundance being with home and family. The fourth house represents home and family. Well, when we get to her relocation chart, when we look at the Salt Lake City chart, that Jupiter energy is going to change, and we'll come back to that at the end. Okay,
Interesting.
at let's take a look at where you first lived. You were born in Newcastle, Wyoming. So this
Hmm.
is the astrocartography map, and that little red X right there in the center is Newcastle. And what we're looking for is the line that is the closest to the X. And as you can see there, well, for those that are listening, I'm going to describe the line. The line is a yellow line that's moving right to the left of that red X where Newcastle, Wyoming is. And at the top of that line, or at the bottom of that line, you can see a glyph, and the glyph is the sun. So this is the sun line, and it's setting off an opportunity aspect to her ascendant. So when you have the sun sextiling the ascendant, this is going to put you in the spotlight. This is going to make your personality shine. It's going to feel really comfortable for you. I have this line connected to Salt Lake City, which is interestingly enough why I've never moved away. So Tina, tell us about where you were born. I know that you didn't spend a lot of time there, but how do
Hmm.
you feel when you return there?
Oh, such a good question. So, Newcastle, I never lived in Newcastle. It was the closest little town that had a hospital. And according to my mom, she was the only person in labor and delivery. I was the only baby in the nursery. So it was just me and her. So we lived in a neighboring little community, and I love going back there. I took my daughter with my mom. We went back, and there's just, I only lived there for a couple years, but there's something there, including my second cousins who live nearby, just in Moorcroft. You can see Gillette there, who have cattle ranches. That just like is the probably the closest one of the closest places I ever feel at home. That whole area, the Black Hills, is
Yeah,
definitely my birthplace. And I've always felt that there's a portal there in the Black Hills in which my soul, my spirit came through. And this is where I was born. So
I
interesting.
love that. And so you already right out the gate, you have one of those positive lines running through right where you were born. Just
Hmm.
validating that if you ever wanted to go back there or move there, it would always be a positive experience for you.
Oh, cool. I love that.
Okay? All right,
Hmm.
let's go to the next place. Now, the next place is when she was 2 years old, she moved to Rapid City, South Dakota. And Rapid City isn't too far away from Newcastle, as you can see on the map, but Rapid City is closer to a different line, and that is the Neptune line. Now, Neptune is the planet of illusion, confusion, and fear, and it's also setting off a challenge to her ascendant, which is how she puts her best foot forward in the world, how she identifies herself, and how other people see her. So, from the ages of 2 to 12, oh, excuse me, yeah,
Hmm.
from 2 to 12, this is where you lived. What was your experience in Rapid City?
Oh, my parents were divorced, both remarried, really struggling second marriages.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was just a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of secrets. It was a
Yes,
lot of
Neptune.
me, back then, we're talking in the late 60s. Children are meant to be seen, not heard.
Not heard,
So
yeah.
I saw a lot of stuff that I knew wasn't appropriate or okay, but it was too fragile, too volatile to say anything. So I just stifled and tried to protect my little brother as much as I can. Yeah.
Okay, that is the perfect summation of exactly what we're talking about with
Mm.
Neptune. Neptune is illusion, it's secrets, it's nothing being completely clear. It's feeling like an afterthought.
Mm.
So, this is a place that you really don't ever have to go back to,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if you do, though all of those feelings are gonna come rushing back.
Mhm. Yeah, they do. Every time I do go back, because I have an aunt who lives there, and her property
Mhm.
is beautiful. She's the only reason I would go back.
Right.
Um, it just, yeah, it's, I usually end up in tears. It brings up bad
Yeah.
memories. It's
Yeah.
really tough. Yeah. But it was when I was 12 that that's when things that's interesting because that must be part of the reason why I chose to leave there at 12, right?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that leads us into the next slide.
Okay.
So then, when you were 12 years old, you moved to Denver, Colorado. Now, we can see that Denver, Colorado is just directly south from where you were born, okay? But the lines in the astrocartography map are going kind of diagonal across the map. And
Mhm.
Denver is where you moved when you were 12. Tell us a story about that.
Okay, so when I was 12, my parents had been divorced for 6 or 7 years by then, and my mom had decided to leave. My mom had custody of my brother and I, who's younger. My mom
Mhm.
decided to move to Denver, to find a job. She had just gotten recently divorced from a rough relationship, and so it would only be natural that my brother and I would go with my mom. Well, I don't remember the initial conversation, but it was kind of decided that my brother and I were going to stay with my dad in Rapid City. And it was the night before we were going to go to the courts and talk to the judge and have him, turn custody over to my dad. And I don't know what it was, if I heard something or I had this knowing, but I remember looking at my mother and saying, "No, we have to stay. We have to go with her. She's going to need me." Like I'm 12. Like, where would that come from? And I felt like it was to save her life, honestly. And so I don't know what that was about. And my 12-year-old brain's reasoning was, well, my dad's remarried. He's got a family. He'll be fine. But
Yeah.
I didn't want my mom to go alone. So I told her that night, and she, of course, was shocked, probably not fully prepared, of like, well, where are we going to live? And now I got to look for schools and all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was the decision to like move. I don't remember the date or anything, but yeah.
Wow. So as you can see, that Rapid City, which is diagonal, in the upper corner there from Denver, You follow that line. Now, Neptune, one of the things that I failed to mention about Neptune is it's the planet of intuition. So
Mm,
your intuition said, "Hey, Tina, you've got to go with your mom."
mm,
And that Neptune line continued in Denver. So for the next 4 years while you were or excuse me, yeah,
yeah.
next
Hmm.
3 years while you were living in Denver, Colorado, some of the same themes were arriving for you. A lot of that Neptunian energy, illusion, confusion, not really sure what's going on or where you're moving towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, let's take a look at the next one because the next move was Phoenix, Arizona.
This is
Oh,
my
we pulled
transit for 12 years
oh,
old. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So this is the transit for 12 years old. So one of the things that I wanted to mention about the transits and how the planets were supporting you and supporting your intuition is because Uranus, which is the planet at the very top of your chart, in the outer ring is what we're looking at for where the planets were exactly in April of 1978 that was giving your intuition the nudge that it needed to go with your mom. Uranus had just left the eighth house of death, rebirth, and transformation and entered the ninth house of long distance travel. Anytime your ninth house is illuminated with a planetary energy, that's going to instigate a big move. Also, Jupiter, that little orange little number 4, had just crossed over the line from the fourth house of home, family, real estate into the fifth house of creativity. So when the fourth house and the ninth house are illuminated in your chart, that also instigates a move. So even though you didn't know why you were thinking, I'm going to move with my mom to Colorado, the universe did. And the
Hmm.
universe was supporting it with those planets.
And that was a big move for a kid, right? To leave her other
Huge.
parent behind, to be separated like that. Oh
Yes.
my God. We used to have to ride the Greyhound bus, my brother and I, back and forth between Denver and Rapid City. It
Oh
was
my
six,
gosh.
it was 6 hours.
That's a
And
long time to
we'd
be in a
stop.
bus.
Yeah, my dad or my mom would make sure we'd sit right behind the driver, because back in the 60s and early 70s, well, I guess this is the 70s by then, it was the buses were sketch. You know, we'd stop at these little side towns in Wyoming and you didn't know who was getting on and how many drinks they'd had and we'd and then we'd stop. I think we'd stop in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we'd have to get off the bus. So we'd go into a diner, and my brother and I would get a booth, and we'd order French fries and split French fries or something. And then we'd be I'd be panicking, making sure that we get to the bus on time and can
Yeah,
get to where we go. Oh my god, yeah, it was a big move.
it was a big move. Okay, the next one is when you did move to Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona. Um, you've told me stories about how, driving around in Phoenix, Arizona in 120 degrees with no air conditioner in your car. I mean, that is intense. That is very, very intense. Now, Phoenix is an interesting story here. Phoenix is kind of in between two lines. The line that it's the closest to is the green line to the right of Phoenix,
Mm,
and that green line is Venus. Venus is the goddess of love, relationships, and balance, but it's setting off a challenging aspect to your midheaven, which is fate, destiny, and what you came here to do with your life. When you have Venus challenging your midheaven, what that does is it gives you themes of difficulty in relationships, tension and strife in relationships, especially one to one,
mm,
especially intimate relationships,
mm,
boyfriends, husbands, things like that.
mm.
So, how did that manifest for you?
Okay, so this is just my mom and I at this point. My brother had returned back to live with my dad shortly after we moved to Denver. So it was just mom and I. And this move really started dividing us. We were more like roommates. She, you know, we're both super independent, and she was working to, you know, going to school and working, or working two shifts, or she was just a hard worker, and she wasn't around a lot. And I was, you know, in high school. And so we just really started butting heads and didn't see eye to eye. And prior to a couple months before graduation, she had asked me to move out. And so I moved out, and I didn't really have any place to go. I
Mm,
was working. I'd been working since I was 14 as a waitress. And I ended up meeting some guy at a concert, and he was the only person I could move in with because my
mm.
friends were living at home with their parents.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting because one of the reasons I think she kind of encouraged me or pushed me out was because she was entering a new relationship,
Oh, okay.
which soon became her third husband. So I ended up moving in with this guy that I met who was an ex-felon. He was an
Mm,
asshole. He was a sociopath. He was abusive. There was a lot of drugs, physical, emotional, mental, sexual drug abuse in
yeah.
that year and a half relationship right out of high school. It was tough. Homelessness, you know, that was tough.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that kind of instigated a shift, right? Right. So as we're looking at this map here, seeing the tension in relationships is so it so tells the story of
Hmm.
your time in Phoenix. And I'm guessing that's also a place that you don't necessarily ever have a desire to go back to, like,
No,
ever.
no. We did go back. Doug and I flew in there to go to Sedona a few years ago, and I
Mm.
didn't recognize it. Just wanted to drive as fast as I could to get through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's go to the next slide because the next slide, I think, is either the transits or, yeah. So these were the transits that were happening in October of 1985 that were instigating this move. You were in a relationship that was really terrible. He was not nice to you, he was not kind. But what I find so fascinating about this chart is Chiron, the wounded healer, was in your fourth house in the outer ring. It's that little upside down key, that little black
Mm,
key in the fourth house. Chiron, what it does is it shines a light on our deepest trauma and our deepest wound. And the fourth house is home, family, and real estate.
mm,
Then we have Jupiter, again, that little orange number 4 was flying through the 12th house. When Jupiter, the planet of good fortune and abundance, higher mind, higher education, goes through the 12th house of intuition, in astrology, they call this the angel on your shoulder. I'm getting complete goosebumps right now. You've mentioned to me that there was a window of time where you were able to escape, get out of there, and to move to a different place. And it was because the angels were on your shoulder,
mm.
guiding you to get out of there and
Yeah.
providing the opportunities to move.
It's so fascinating because I think probably for the last 6 months of that relationship, that's where a lot of the homelessness was. I would walk the streets, like literally in the middle of the night, by myself, be nobody on the road, and I would just be sobbing and crying out to the heavens. When am I going to be able to walk away from this? Because I knew it wasn't my long term life. I knew
Right.
he wasn't a long term person in my life. It,
No.
not that I could, I don't even think I knew what the word karma meant or even knew the word karma back then, but there was a feeling that I had to do my time, and then I was going to be able to leave. And I was just begging, like, give me an answer. When is my time coming? Because I don't know how much more of this I can take. But I knew it
Yeah.
was coming, and that
So the
window did
angels were
open up.
listening. The
Hmm.
angels opened it up for you. They heard that plea. They heard your cry. The other thing that is amazing is Saturn, that little cross with the little hook on it up in the ninth house, that little brown glyph. Saturn is the planet of responsibility and restriction. And it was in your ninth house of long distance travel, sitting right on top of your south node, which represents energy that you're integrating into this life. So not only was there an opening, but there was an integration that was showing you where to go, telling you where to go, and where you would be more comfortable.
Hmm. Interesting. Oh, yeah, that was a tough night. Um, I remember him leaving. We had just gotten in this huge battle. I was sleeping in the truck, a mini truck in an apartment complex. He would spend the night in his grandmother's apartment in air conditioning, and I would have to sleep in the truck. And then
Mm.
we got in this huge fight. He got in a car with a bunch of women or girls and drove off, and I had nothing. I didn't have the keys to the truck. I didn't have a key to the apartment. I was supposed to go to work, and I can remember sitting on the curb, just pulling chunks of hair off of my head that he had pulled out. And it was like, what do I do? I had to call in sick to work. And by the way, this would be really interesting too. I was also being interviewed by police, and it might have been the FBI because I was a witness to a murder. And so all of that was happening at the same. They were visiting me at work. They had approval from my manager to come talk to me at work where it was safe.
Mhm.
So all of that was happening, and I called my dad and his wife, my stepmom at the time. They knew somebody in Phoenix area, and they came and picked me up that night. And the next morning, put me on a plane to Wisconsin, and that's how that trip went.
Great segue into the next clip or the next slide. So you found yourself in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And Eau Claire, Wisconsin was definitely a better option for you than Phoenix was. However, the strife didn't necessarily end in Eau Claire because the line that's very close to Eau Claire in your chart is the moon line, and the moon is representative of our emotions, our intuition, and our connection to emotional relationships. Also, your moon is squaring the ascendant, which is again connecting to tension, connecting to who am I, where am I going, how are other people seeing me. Now, some really good things happened in Eau Claire. You met your husband in Eau Claire, correct?
Mhm. I did.
So you
Mhm.
found your soulmate, again, connecting to your emotional energy, but you found someone that was drastically different than the relationship that you had left in Phoenix.
Mhm. That's for
So
sure.
I'm guessing, and just from what I know about you and the journey that you and Doug have been through, you know, learning how to trust again was very
Mhm.
important for you, and he was the
Mhm.
perfect candidate to teach you how to open up and trust again,
Yeah.
especially since that is moon line kind of things when
Mm.
when we're looking at that map. I
Mhm.
find that really fascinating.
Hmm.
So you 2 were in Eau Claire for about 3 years, correct? 3 or 4 years?
I think so. I don't remember.
This is where things get a little fuzzy with the timing, right?
Yeah. It's really interesting because I was getting ready to move, like, right before I met him. I was gonna move to Kansas City, and go to the Art Institute. My dad and my brother left, and my stepmom, they moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they're like, "Do you wanna go with?" And I said, "No." So I stayed in Wisconsin by myself, didn't know anybody except for a couple of friends from work, started up at the university, and decided I wanted to go to art school. And Kansas City was where I was going to go because it was closer to Lincoln. And
Yeah,
then I met Doug, and that totally changed my plans.
totally changed your
And I
plans. Okay,
totally
let's
changed his plans.
yeah, I'll bet you did. I'll bet you did because isn't it so you actually had him move with you out of Eau Claire. That was the next
Mhm.
move, correct? And you
Mhm.
guys moved to Hammond. We didn't pull up a screenshot for Hammond, but the next shot we're gonna show is the move that you did after Hammond to St. Paul. And St. Paul is right in between Eau Claire and, excuse me, Hammond is right in between St. Paul and Eau Claire.
Mhm.
Now, St. Paul was a little bit different energy. There we see your sun line reemerging in St. Paul. The sun shines on you once again, bringing out your
Mm.
talents, bringing out your gifts. I'm guessing St. Paul was an easier stint than Eau Claire.
Mhm. It was, 'cause I started art school in Minneapolis, and so I was commuting from Eau Claire to Minneapolis every day,
Mhm.
for the first semester, and then we moved to Hammond, and we lived there for like a year or so. Yeah, St. Paul was awesome. Doug enjoyed St. Paul. It was a big move for him to move outside of his hometown,
Yeah.
but we did it together, and that's just how we've done everything. It's like, this is what we're going to do, and we're just going to support support one another and just do it. We just never turned
Yeah.
and looked back. St. Paul was fun. I loved the big city. We weren't right in the city, we were just next to it by the river, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. He was a musician, so it was a great place for two artistic people to, you know, be around other people who were like us.
Yes. Yes.
That's for
And I
sure.
love that again, we're starting to see a theme with the astrocartography. How you were feeling, what kind of opportunities were coming your way. Even though Eau Claire provided a safe haven for you to escape, Phoenix,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the same kind of energy as St. Paul, even though they're pretty close in proximity to each other, just a couple of hours away. Those
Mm-hmm.
couple of hours made a huge difference in your energy levels, how you felt about yourself. Again, your sun is where you shine in the world, so you were shining in St. Paul. You were feeling more in your element.
It's interesting you say that because one of my art projects, I think it was the first year of art school, we had to do, it was called, the whole year was called Visual Studies. And I had to do an art project. And when you cross the river, that divides Minnesota and Wisconsin on I can't even remember if it's I-90 or I-80 there. I think it's I-90. When you cross the river, when you're crossing the river from Wisconsin to Minnesota, it's this brand new bridge. It's wide, it's expansive, it's beautiful. But then I was going home at night, back to Hammond or back to Wisconsin, it's this old crickety kind of bridge that just, it was the metal was rusted and it just was narrow. You could just tell it was outdated. I felt like I was going back in time, going back to Wisconsin, where going to the city just felt like progress and
Yes.
new things happening.
Oh
Interesting.
my
I did
gosh,
that
I
as a
love that.
project.
I love that, and that's such a visual for what we're looking at with your astrocartography. Anytime you were going back to Eau Claire or Hammond, you felt like you were regressing into more difficult times, but the
Mhm.
closer you got to St. Paul in Minnesota, the better things got, the shinier things got for you.
Yeah, and I think I've only been back to Eau Claire once since we've moved out here.
Mhm.
Maybe twice, well, probably twice, because I went back for Doug's dad's funeral, and I think another time. And we've
Yeah.
been out here for almost 30 years. I have
Yes.
no desire to go back there. And that's where his family is, his sisters and his mom, cousins, everything. And I just don't have any desire.
But if they wanted to meet you in St. Paul, you would be totally down.
Probably. Or Park City.
Right? Or Park City, right? That's closer.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So what instigated this final move?
The ins the to sorry, I was switching here.
No,
What ins
that was perfect. Go ahead and
Okay.
switch it.
Okay. So what instigated this final move was Doug and I were having decided, well, I had graduated from school, and we had
Mhm,
decided that when I graduate from school, we'll get married. So we did that. I graduated, we got married. I think I graduated in December, we got married in May, and we wanted to start having children, and we were having some issues with fertility.
mhm.
And we were in a conversation, and out blurts from my mouth. And as it's coming out, I'm listening to what I'm saying, thinking, who's saying this? Why am I saying this? This is nothing I would never say. And I said to him, why don't we move out west closer to my family? Because that's the last thing I wanted. Sorry, mom, if you're listening, but I didn't want to be close to my family. I loved being independent.
Right.
And I'm sure it speaks to my chart, the
It does.
dragon and the horse and the tiger in my chart who wants
Mhm.
that freedom and independence. But it was a way for me, because even as I was saying, I was like, that makes no sense. So I picked a place that I thought, well, this is kind of close. My mom would be 8 hours away from Salt Lake City because she was in Reno. My dad and my brother, we were in Jackson Hole, so that's 4.5 hours. So that's not like in the same town. So I'm justifying, like, okay, we're flying through Salt Lake City, never been. Let's see what it's like. Let me do some job interviews while we're there, just for a day and a half.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So he's like, okay, I made it this far, might as well. So we came out here, did a job interview, got hired, and 2 months later we were moving out.
Oh my
19,
god. Okay, so
1995.
I freaking love this because guess what? You're going through one of the very biggest changes people can go through astrologically. You are going through your first Saturn return. Saturn is that brown glyph that is in the first house coming back, and then you can see it's almost right on top of your natal Saturn. They call this the big shakedown of life. It's where the universe picks you up by the bootstraps, turns you upside down, and shakes all of the change out of your pockets and then says, okay, build a new life. That's exactly what you did. You did that. You got married. Lots of people either go to college, finish college, get married, start trying to have children, all during the Saturn return. You got
Mm,
married and moved to Utah. Okay, let's
mhm,
take a look at your chart for Utah. Okay, there's Salt Lake City, and here again we see the moon line. However, in both of the other charts where the moon was shining, it had tension, it had challenge, it had, a ruffling of feathers, so to speak. Well, the moon is now sextiling or creating opportunity to your ascendant, which is how other people see you. So when the
mm,
moon is shining its brightest, this makes you madly intuitive, at one with nature, at one with yourself, connecting to mother energy, which is at the time what you were trying to become, right?
mhm.
So you moved to the moon, which is where you became more fertile. Because this is where you landed, right? You came to Salt
Mhm.
Lake City, and soon after, you started having kids, correct?
Yeah, just a couple of years later, we were able, yeah, through in artificial insemination, we were able to
Yeah,
have our first child. Yeah,
absolutely.
and speaking of intuition, this is when it was a year or so in when I started realizing the family I was meant to be close to was the beautiful people I was meant to meet. It's like the family that I was creating, or it was my spirit family. It wasn't my
Yes,
bio, biological family. It
right.
was this um, new agey kind of family of high spirited feminine energy that really opened up my intuition and started teaching me how to trust that and participate in those kinds of activities, which led me down this path to sitting with you, a
Mhm.
family member, doing this kind of thing. So it's
Yeah,
so fascinating. Who would have thought? I would have never thought Salt Lake City would be
right?
the mecca for me to go down this crazy path.
And you needed to be on your moon line to do that. You
Mm,
needed to connect to divine feminine, archetypal energies. This is where you started your spiritual journey,
yeah.
which is so in alignment with your moon line. You just can't make this shit up. I just
No.
freaking love
So
it.
what
Okay,
you're
let's take a
saying
look. Oh, go
so
ahead.
what you're saying though, if I had moved maybe 10 years late earlier, that
Mhm.
moon line wouldn't have been there.
It would've, yeah.
Oh, it would
All
have.
of these
Okay.
lines, they're there because it's, connected to your natal chart, which
Oh,
those planets never move and change.
but the moon, this, like on your somebody else's chart, that moon sign might not be there.
Right. So, for
Okay.
example, in my astrocartography map, my sun line moves through Salt Lake City rather than my moon line.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
So this is kind of why I never leave Utah, because my sun shines brightly in Utah.
Mhm.
I shine, my personality shines in Utah.
Hmm, okay.
It
Are we
doesn't
going
for
to the
my
next
husband. Yes.
That's why he wants to leave.
Toshi's Toshi's like, "Let's get back to Japan, please." Okay, so this is your relocation chart, and I love this as a bookend to what we're talking about with your astrocartography. Remember at the beginning of the reading, we talked about Jupiter, the planet of good fortune and abundance, being in the 4th house of home and family. Well, guess what it did? It shifted into your 5th house of fertility and making children. Come on.
Yeah.
You can't make this shit up. And where we find Jupiter is where we have plenty of energy. It's where we find good fortune and abundance. And that's what you found with your children. And now you've started your second Saturn return and you moved down to Utah County, again a big move, and now your whole family lives in the same house under the same roof.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're saying this stuff because when I had my son 27 years ago,
Mhm.
that's there was such an awareness and such an energy around me that I knew that the work that I would be doing would be because of the children.
Yes.
Me even sitting here doing feng shui and doing astrology, it was the children, not my children. It was all the children because there's been times when, not even in meditation, where I can feel hundreds, if not thousands, of children behind me pushing me forward into something or saying, do this, do
Yeah.
that. Children has been my purpose since living here, which is fascinating because before we moved here, before we, you know, even I met Doug, fucking kids, I don't want fucking kids. God, I hate fucking kids.
Right.
But they
Your
are,
5th house was empty. Your
yeah.
5th house was empty. Well, when you moved to Ju when you moved here, Jupiter is abundance. It's all of the kids pushing you going, "Hey, hey, hey."
Yeah, fascinating.
I
Wow.
love it. Let's take a look at Doug's, information next. Doug's natal chart. So Doug, his sun shines in the sign of Cancer. He is the sensitive soul. Cancer is the archetype of the nurturer, the mother. Having your sun shine in the sign of Cancer in a men's chart really lends itself to being kind of an old softy on the inside, maybe hard on the outside.
Mm,
The moon shines in the sign of Sagittarius, just like Tina's moon, fiery Sagittarius philosophy, long distance travel. And then his rising sign is Gemini, the sign of duality. You've got the good twin and the evil twin. You never know which one you're going to get and which one is going to switch at any moment in time, right? Um, so let's that and one of the things that I noticed in his chart, you want to look at the two planets at the bottom of his chart, both interestingly enough in the 5th house of children. When he This is his birth energy from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, but pay attention to those two planets in his
mm,
5th house because they're going to shift in his chart too. Interestingly enough, both of your charts, the planets shifted between the 4th and 5th house. I
mm.
mean, are we sensing a theme here? Good Lord. I love it. Okay, let's take a look here. So this is Doug's lines for Eau Claire, and the closest line that he had was the Uranus line. Uranus is the planet of expecting the unexpected, but it's setting off a challenge to his AC, his ascendant. So lots of twists and turns in life. He was thrown a ton of curveballs, a lot of unexpected changes kind of shifted his reality. One of them being you.
Yeah. I think he would have still lived in Eau Claire if I hadn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You came and you scooped him up and you said, "We're moving to Hammond. Bye." That is that is kind of how his life was before he met you. He was always going through lots of different twists and turns. The cool thing about Uranus is it's the planet of individuality. It's how we march to the beat of our own drum, and that's kind of always been his personality. He's always wanted to do his own thing and be on his own in a lot of ways. Let's take a look at the next one.
Can I tell
The
you what
next
we did in Hammond?
Yes, please.
We worked at a golf club.
You did?
Yeah, I was, in the bar and restaurant, and he was a greenskeeper.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this
Was it
little
a fun
golf
job?
course. It was a lot of fun, except for those old fucks, those old guys that do senior golf league, you know? Oh my god. They're
Those
just
old fucks.
assholes.
Yeah,
Just those old boomers, you know?
the
But yeah,
boomers.
that was
Oh,
fun.
I love that. Okay, so this is his astrocartography chart for Salt Lake City. He has
Wow.
2 lines running through Salt Lake City. His Uranus line, but it's trining. It's setting off a positive aspect to his ascendant, meaning this is where he gets to feel free.
Mm.
This is where he gets to go on adventures. Uranus wants to just go and explore and be itself. But then also he has the Saturn line running through. Saturn is responsibility. So again, with his Gemini rising, Utah's a perfect place because he's got responsibility, which allows him to go and be free.
Yeah. Yeah, he goes and works 12-hour day, and then he gets on his mountain bike or
Goes and
his
rides around, right? So I
Mhm.
love that Salt Lake City and, Lehigh, where we're living now, are right smack dab in the middle of those lines. He shares
Mm.
both of those energies, and both of them are positive.
Yeah. Oh, he just even I mean, we've been here for 30 years almost, and he's still like, "I just love it here." You know,
Yeah,
I feel like I'm on vacation still.
yeah,
That's so cool.
perfect. This is his relocation chart, and remember those 2 planets, Uranus and Pluto, were in his 5th house of children, creativity. They moved into the 4th house of home, family, stability.
Mm,
So it's like both of your planetary energies needed to shift to bring those 2 kids onto the
mm,
planet.
interesting. Wow. This is so cool.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
I geek out over this stuff because it's so much fun.
It's really cool. So now, can I flip out of this screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm curious, you mentioned earlier, so can people, if they want to move, they're deciding like, where to retire or where they want to purchase a second home in, is
Yes.
this a good thing for them to do?
Absolutely, because we're gonna look at your relocation chart to see where the planets shift, if at all. For example, a great case study was my husband. He's from Tokyo, Japan, and when we did his relocation chart in Utah, all of the planets shifted drastically because it's opposite sides of the world, right?
Mhm.
We look at the astrocartography map to see which planet is lighting up that geography, and then, we also look at the transits to see the timing of it. For example, in all of
Mm,
those major moves that you made, your ninth house was illuminated and your 4th house was illuminated. That's a really good combination for moving energy, moving city, moving state, moving country. And that's what was ignited in my husband's chart when he moved from Tokyo, Japan to Utah. So we would take a look at the transits for the timing, the relocation chart to see how your energy is going to respond to that place, and then
okay.
see the astrocartography map to see which planet is supporting you while you live there.
So can you tell, like, say, so for instance, there's times when I just get fed up. It's like, oh, I want
Mhm.
to move, right? Because that's part of my energy. Just like I was saying, if I'm not
You're
moving, I'm
Aquarius. You're
changing the
Aquarius rising. Yeah, grass is
changing.
always greener. Get me the hell out of here.
Yeah. So would you be able to say, hey, here's a place to go, but you wouldn't want to move there until you're 72 or whatever?
Yes,
Like you
that's
pinpoint it to
exactly it.
that?
Yes, yes.
That's so cool.
Now, here's the thing that we didn't necessarily touch on, okay? The planets that you had that were a little bit more negative in the places that you lived, you didn't have really drastically terrible planets, believe it or
Mm,
not.
okay.
Some people have planets that are running through there. These are places you should never visit. For example,
Mm,
I will never go to Texas or anywhere in the deep South because that's where all of my negative planets are. I don't
Mm,
need to visit there. That's just an
mm,
experience that I can skip. All of the Middle Eastern countries, they're not good for me either. So
mhm,
what we do as astrologers is we find the places that are going to be ideal. Now, 9 times out of 10, if you're intuitively getting a hit saying, "I'm gonna move to Cabo San Lucas," 9 times out of 10, there's gonna be a line that's gonna be going through there that's gonna make you feel really good.
okay.
I've done
Mm,
plenty of readings though where people are like, "I really wanna move to Washington, DC," and it's one of their worst lines, and then I'll ask them, "Why
mm,
is it Washington, DC that you want to go there?" And they'll say something like, "Oh, well, my work is taking me there, or I feel obligated to go, or a family member's there," and I'm like, "We need to
mm,
revisit."
mm. Wow. So, I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be curious about this. Do you offer this then as a service?
I sure do, and we're gonna leave the link down below so that you
Okay.
can see um, how to contact me. I'd be happy to walk you through the astrocartography process. It's so much fun. But also, I'm curious to find out from all of you who are listening. Comment below, where is somewhere you've always wanted to live
Ooh.
and why? Why have you
Mhm.
always wanted to live there? I'm
Now,
just
is
curious.
that different than saying this is like a place on my bucket list that I wanna go to?
You can also check for places, that you travel. For
Okay.
example, there's a couple places in Mexico that I've gone where the trip just went fantastic, and then there's a location I went to Playa del Carmen once, had a terrible time, and it was because one of my planets was there. One of those lines was, illuminating that geography, and it was not good for me, and I had a terrible
Mm,
time on the trip. So, even if
mm,
you're looking to go travel or if you're wanting to go on a
okay.
spiritual retreat and it's in a
Ooh,
specific location, you can contact me and I can show you how you're gonna be feeling while you're there.
oh my god, what an amazing service to offer. So, what do people need to like, what do they give you to do that? D Their birth
Yep,
information?
your birth information, your date of birth, exact time of birth, and place.
Okay. Wow, so cool. Oh, that was so insightful. Thank you for taking me down memory road.
Thanks for sharing Memory Road with all of us. We really appreciate it. It helps us to understand you
Mm,
on such a deep level, so thank you for sharing.
yeah. Well, did you wanna pull a card for today? Do you have
Yes.
anything else you wanna add? I'm just having so much fun with you, my friend.
The Queen of Earth, thoughtful, creative, warm, sensible, taking time to share your love with those around you, making sensible, uh, you know, decisions with your loved ones,
Mm,
dealing with challenges that they come along, but having understanding and kindness for other people. The Queen energy is divine feminine, and she's a nurturer. She wants to nurture, she wants to help, but sometimes we need to do that in a more sensible way.
mm, well said. Okay, it's been a
Thanks
blast.
for
Thank you
joining
so
us.
much. You did a lot of work on this. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad. I have so much fun doing it. It's so much fun. I love it.
Okay, well, we'll see everybody soon.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.